You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. Have you ever wondered what it takes for Ross Barnett Reservoir to be such a prime fishery? We're going to learn a little bit about that today with Ryan Jones, fisheries biologist at the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks.
Mississippi Outdoors is sponsored by Entergy Mississippi. Entergy is building a stronger and cleaner grid to power a brighter future and protect our great outdoors for generations to come.
You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt, and today, fishing with Ryan Jones, our fisheries biologist here at MDWFP, and specifically like Ross Barnett. I know we're going to talk about Ross Barnett, but that's home for you, isn't it?
It is. That was I was there managing that fishery and that vegetation stand out there for about 10 years, and so not only that, just grew up there on Pelahatchie Bay, so went to Northwest Rankin, so it's kind of home for me, my backyard.
Yeah. And even right here at the home offices, kind of right in your backyard, isn't it?
It is. It is. I mean, I grew up northeast Jackson, so kind of grew up running the little tributaries and the banks of the Pearl River, barefooted, back in the day before moving out toward the reservoir. So, I've been intrigued by the water, since I was a kid.
Sure. And I think the official title, Assistant Chief of Fisheries here at MDWFP.
That's correct.
So what all does that entail? You might not be able to fit it all in one answer, but.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess the most important job function I have is managing the federal aid components of the sport fish restoration funds that we receive to operate. And then me and the chief, we both kind of assist with total operations of the Bureau statewide. Now,
do you call him chief every day? Is that?
I don't call him chief, no. So he didn't call me assistant chief either. So
we're on a first name basis around here.
That's right. We're all family in the Fisheries Bureau.
Yeah. All right. So the Ross Barnett Reservoir. Let's just start with this. If you were explaining to someone the type of fishery, let's say you meet a stranger in an airport and, Ross Barnett, and they say, well, what kind of fishery is that? How would you define it as a fishery?
Well, it's really consistent. It has a water level stays relatively stable. They do a drawdown, but it's not much of one. It's like 1.5 feet, so we have stable habitat. It's always stable spawns. Even when they don't have a good spawn, they get a spawn, and that's all sport fish really. It really, the amount of habitat with all the nice lotus pads and the native vegetation that we have out there really allows for a tremendous forage base, which supports bass and the crappie that all our anglers love to go out there and catch.
Yeah. It's a super duper bass crappie fishery, obviously. Okay. You said you called it lotus pads. Did I say that right?
That's right. American lotus is, the big pads that are out there.
Yeah.
That's the native vegetation that we look to manage for, out there. So we're always trying to target exotic invasive plants and try to allow natives to flourish, so that's what we want to do. The only time we'll target native vegetation is if it's in, a navigational channel or maybe there's a lot of exotics around natives. They may get treated as well. But we try to manage for them, because if we have native vegetation in place, then the exotic invasive stuff can't find anywhere to start.
Right.
So we try to keep that, even if it looks like there's a lot of plants in the way, maybe like on the shoreline, it looks like maybe they're not paying attention to that. We are paying attention to that because we're actually managing for native stuff. We want the native community to flourish and do well because you're not going to grow a fish population in a water body without aquatic vegetation. It's the difference because there's so many invertebrates that utilize that plant community, and you're talking about. Just worms and crawfish and insects and the frogs and everything that uses that plant community as a habitat provides a supplemental forage to the all the way from brim all the way up to bass.
Yeah.
So It's really important. It's one of the biggest parts of the fishery that we can control. That makes a difference.
Yeah. And I don't profess to be an A1 top-notch bass fisherman, but I have followed it and admired it my whole life. And, and all the great ones, grass, their eyes light up. And the different types of, whether it's hydrilla and, it's Seminole or, whatever they have, and pads, same there. I mean, it means fish.
That's right, and the hydrilla is actually one that we try to treat on Ross Barnett. It's exotic.
Not native.
It is not native.
Okay.
It's not native up there either. But the habitat up there is with the deep water, up there like say Pickwick and that sort of thing. It helps with habitat up there with the large water depths, the amount of water column it can bring habitat up and higher into the column, whereas Barnett, is relatively shallow on average,
especially compared to like a.
And so we want the native, coontail, stands to flourish and that sort of thing. So when we're actually trying to use a different type of herbicide now that kind of conserves coontail, it doesn't hurt coontail as bad as it does. Hydrilla. So trying to really manage for the native submerged species as well, which can be a difficult task because when you're trying to treat submerged vegetation, you have to worry. It's got to make contact for a certain amount of time, and if it doesn't, it's not near as effective. So, and you're talking a lot of that hydrilla is up the river, and so that the river's just kind of pulling it off of the plant a lot of times if you can't keep it on there and you have too much water exchange. Yeah, the herbicide. So, that can be
a challenge.
A challenge for sure.
I would think. Okay, back to the pads. All right, like the typical term, lily pads.
Right.
Is that the same thing as what you said, Lotus pads? Is that the same thing, or is that actually a different term?
There's other types of pads. We got whitewater lily looks more like kind of like a Pac-Man. Have the ones you've seen the pads that have like the little pie shape cut out of it. A little small white flower. Sometimes it's purple or pink. Whitewater lily is a native, and you'll see it, throughout the southeast too. But also water shield is a pad that sits on the surface, and it can cover some ponds. It can be a problem sometimes, but American Lotus is that big pad that has the pods that come up, large white flower, and you see actually the pods, you'll see them a lot of decorations and stuff. My wife likes decorating, so she had no idea. I was like, that little pod right there, that's a lily pad. She had no idea that was a flower off a lily pad. But those little pods, it's pretty neat. Those pods when they die, they kind of curl over like this, and there's little holes in there. It drops out, but those little seeds are not viable unless like a little insect burrows through it and creates this little hole. Like we went out and collected a bunch of those pods one time, tried to create some pad fields and some other lakes, and none of them were viable. And then we turned to find out like you needed to file a little edge off of it to get some water in there to allow it to germinate. So it's like a natural, there's some natural insects that work with the lily pads to allow them to germinate and actually continue to create new pads outside of the
pretty cool.
tubers.
What do they call it? Like a symbiotic relationship?
That's right.
Yeah. Chip using the big terms.
Yeah,
what we mean, we got to saw that thing in half or drill a hole in it there in order to, for
They're
it to
hard
work.
as they can be too, man. I mean, those Lotus pads are, it's like a marble.
You can do it yourself though, right? You don't have to wait for the insect. Like, could you
Well, you said y'all did.
Okay.
That's right. You could file it or like a thin drill bit or something like that.
And that's to sort of
and you get it to
introduce it.
germinate, and then you can translocate it that way.
So, it's interesting. We spend 10 minutes talking about, pads, those Lotus pads, lily pads at Ross Barnett, because a lot of us, that's what we think of. If we've ever driven across on 43 or, around the trail or fished, in any of those sloughs, I remember an experience 20 years ago, throwing a fluke and kind of fishing on top of those pads at number 7 and catching fish. It's a lot of fun, but that's kind of what we think about from a bass fishing standpoint at Ross Barnett is pads.
I mean, ribbit frog through that stuff
Right.
is dynamite, man. They and you can catch them all summer long. When it's really difficult to catch fish and gets hot out there, they'll be in those pads. You may have to search for them a little bit, but you'll find them. Where there's little creek channels coming in, they'll be sitting on the edge of those little creek channels, and they'll be on the edge of those pad fields.
Yeah.
Big fish.
Pro tip, big fish, summertime, shallow water pads at Ross Barnett. Have you ever, I'm sure, the electroshock at Ross Barnett and done some of the, what's the biggest bass you've run into in those scenarios at Ross Barnett?
You don't sample a lot of, double digit fish, but I did shock a 10-pounder off of like a wall over close to the yacht club. It's just this wall with this old boat slips all around. We came around the corner, so it obviously was in pretty deep water, and that's a lot of times what happens when you touch those bigger fish. It's like they just kind of get lower and get out of that field that stuns them and allows you to collect them to sample.
I see.
But a lot of people think that when you go to shock, the water just turns white, but that's just not the case. You're really effective in about 6-7 feet in all directions of the boom, and then if they're big fish, a lot of times it touches them and they'll go deep. So you really got to be quick. A lot of times dipping on the front, and you'll just miss them. And so we like to say that we see about 10% of what's going on out there.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to put the puzzle pieces together. So.
Sure. From a bass fishing standpoint, I'm thinking too, as it pertains to management of aquatic vegetation of all the different kinds. Obviously, native good, sometimes non-native, not necessarily good. But for the average fisherman, like what can they do? What can they be involved in that might help you in regards to that? Or is there anything the average fisherman can do to help?
I mean, certainly don't move plants from water body to water body. Check your trailer and check your boat. Clean your boat. Try to pull off the excess vegetation that you have on the boat. Just not knowing if it's native or exotic. Making sure that you're not putting new plants into water bodies where they don't belong. We have a pretty significant threat coming from either side of us. With giant salvinia, we don't have a lot of that. In the state, it's really yet. It's really in the Tenton waterway, and it's all over Louisiana. And so, we're trying to be very wary of it. Try to find out when new populations do exist. We try to eradicate them as soon as we possibly can. We've got 2 stands of giant salvinia on 2 of our state fishing lakes right now that we're actively trying to eradicate. Problem is with that plant, it's all a clone of itself. Yeah. So it's like if you have to kill every single last individual plant, or you haven't done your job. So Lake Tom Bailey over in Meridian, and I'm sure that probably came from Aliceville. And then down Lake Bill Waller down south. Another state lake, and I'm not sure where that came from, but could have been, somebody from Louisiana, could be somebody coming from Tenton over towards Alabama too. Not real sure where that came from. And, we've also got some in that Pascagoula River marsh down there too. So, we're always trying to pay attention. We were successful on Ross Barnett Reservoir when, years ago. When we had it out there, I mean, it was scattered over about 100 acres, and we were able to do any and everything we possibly could to eradicate it there. And it was a pretty neat situation. Probably the first time it's ever been done. Whereas, like I said, that was my backyard. Yeah. So I was responsible for that, and that is one of the things I'm proud of. Working at this agency, just doing what we had to do to accomplish that objective right there, because they declared a state of emergency and closed down Pelahatchie Bay to recreational boating, and all those people, you know, that live on Pelahatchie Bay, you know, they assume that they're going to be able to utilize their boats and get to the main lake. And so here we are, you know, having to figure out what to do. And so, but
it's a pretty significant problem if that's what's required to fix it.
That's right. Well, we just had an opportunity to eradicate it, that if we didn't do something right then and there, that it was going to be over with, and it would be everywhere. It would just become something that we were going to have to manage moving forward from here on out. And it's just going to cost more money and probably need more manpower, and, you know, result in more chemical in the water, which we don't want to just continue to increase the amount of treatments that are needed. We're trying to get on the front end and reduce the treatments needed, you know, push back in exotic invasives so that native can flourish and not have to treat as much. But, you know, it was a neat deal though. Adding, you know, we drew down the reservoir and used floating containment booms and prescribed fire, and so we broke out all the
prescribed fire
stops, you know.
Okay, out on the water.
So we drew these areas down, and all the backwater areas were all infested. And we
drew it totally down?
We drew it down 1.5 feet, which pulled all the water off the shallow water areas where it was. It had infested these backwater areas in multiple locations on that north shore of Pelahatchie Bay. And so when we pulled the water off of it, we actually put floating booms around all the areas that had the infestations, and then drew the water down. So when we drew it down, it didn't follow the water out, and the booms kept it in place. And then we sprayed all of the areas with an aerial. Actually had a helicopter come and spray all the bad infested areas. And then we went in there, and it looked like everything was dead, but when you pull back that marginal vegetation was green salvinia underneath it. And so we got with the forester with PRV, and he allowed us to burn some of those areas. He was the one that wrote the burn plans for it. And so by being able to get rid of all that harboring vegetation over the top, we were able to get it out of those areas, you know. And then we brought the water up and started doing surveys and found another spot, you know. It was just a constant battle, you know, and we were maintaining these booms, this array of booms, containment booms to keep it in place, all while, you know, not allowing anybody to fish in there.
Yeah.
And then finally we kind of had a soft opening, a controlled opening with one ramp open. And we knew there wasn't anything in the water, you know, and so we thought we were pretty good. But like I said, when they brought the water back up, it became, I mean, I'd say I had a pit. I thought we had got it and it was done, and we brought that water up, and I had a pit in my stomach when we found some on this point. And we ordered boom 2,700 feet of boom. We wrapped around that point. And it was just in time too, because like this west wind came in, blew all this it was some water hyacinth up there too, blew it all the way around the corner. I mean, like it would have been scattered all over the Pelahatchie Bay had we not wrapped that thing in boom.
When you did,
we got so lucky.
Yeah.
I think multiple times, but I think initially the idea was we were going to draw it down and expose it to cold temps that first year, because it's plants from Brazil.
Okay.
And we drew it down and didn't get the cold temps that year, you know.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it didn't get as cold as it's been the last couple of days, you know.
Ryan, what does giant salvinia compete with? Like, why is it bad? Like, why do you not want it there?
Yeah, so it's a floating aquatic fern, and what it does is it just can double in biomass in a few days under the right conditions, and in fact there's reservoirs in Texas and Louisiana that are really battling it. It'll cover the surface of an entire reservoir, and it'll, you know, in their shallow areas, it can actually continue to grow so fast that it just kind of grows on top of itself, and it'll grow, they say, up to 3 feet deep, and it'll just be a mat from the surface to the bottom.
So it completely chokes it out. Just
choked out. And so if you got that kind of issue, you know, you're dealing with, I mean, you're not getting sport fish, you know, spawning and survival of spawns. And so, you know, for instance, if giant salvinia did get on Ross Barnett Reservoir and it was established and there is no chance of eradicating it, we would just be forced to treat all those areas to maintain open areas for sport fish to spawn, to reproduce, and it's just going to result in a higher cost, to do business, essentially, to conserve our native fish populations that we're going to have to. It's going to cost more, and it's going, and so we're just buying time because really it's coming, it's hard to stop.
Yeah. Well, okay. Buying time, earlier you said, in that situation where you open the ramp and then you were just lucky that you put the floating, boom out when you did because it was found on a point.
Right.
But it's really not luck. Okay, because the management effort is ongoing. You're there, you're working on it, your eyes on it, and concerned with it. So, yeah, there will be other instances. It's not going to be totally eradicated. But because of the agency and people like you in places like Ross Barnett and others, it's going to be managed, and there's going to be an effort to control it for the fish population, therefore for the fishermen, because y'all are working on it. It's like you're not just coming in here drinking coffee every day and saying, hey, what they catch today? You're actively working on it throughout the year, day by day. Right.
We learned a lot during that process. I think we, I didn't know what giant salvinia was when we first found it there. And to be honest, we found it while we were surveying for hydrilla. So we were looking for another plant that we're trying to manage out there, and found that one.
Yeah.
And we weren't, we coordinated with LDWF, Louisiana Department of Wildlife Fisheries, and the Corps and MSU to try to understand, what is the best way to deal with this. And that was, the collaborative effort of all the agencies and experts in the field allowed us to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as for you at the agency, how long have you been here?
18 years.
18 years.
2017.
Okay.
2007, excuse me.
Yeah, 2007. So, yeah, it's catching up with us. 18 years. And your path getting into, wildlife biology and wildlife management, and then ultimately here to MDWFP. How'd all that happen? How'd you wind up here?
I was a hunter, and a fisher my whole life, And, I went to Mississippi State, and I was a civil engineer major is what I was. And I just decided, one summer, it was actually summer before my junior year, I was like, man, I don't know if I want to wake up and do that every day.
Yeah.
So I went and saw, the fisheries professor out there and talked to him a little bit about it. And I got intrigued and really it started at Ross Barnett, at nighttime, sometimes I'd go out there with a little light on the shoreline with a net and catch stuff. Like, golly, I've never seen this before. What is this? And just understanding there was a lot more diversity out there than just a bass, a crappie, and a bluegill. There was all these different kinds of crawfish. Call it like a blue crawfish. Was like, what? Where did this guy come from? And then I have a fisheries science course. One of the main things we had to do was go to pass the course. We had to volunteer on a NOAA research boat, and ended up doing what they called a pelagic trawl, but it's basically trawling 500 meter depths. And so we were pulling up fish that were, I knew that me and the rest of those people on that boat and a small handful of other people was, the only people that ever seen these fish, and that intrigued me right there. I almost went saltwater at that point, and it bit me pretty hard.
Yeah.
But it actually started when I graduated. I started working offshore as post Katrina. I was working with post Katrina. It was toxicology stuff, so we were collecting samples of fish and shellfish to make sure that everything was safe to eat after everything kind of that flood came back out of New Orleans and Mississippi coastal areas. Make sure everything was safe to eat, and it sounds like it was a solution to pollution. A lot of salt water out there. So, but that kind of got my foot in the door to doing a marine fisheries observer work, which I did for a couple of years. And I was just kind of traveling down and getting on commercial boats, like anywhere from, Brownsville, Texas, all the way to Tampa. So it was a neat experience too. We basically, coordinator would call you up and give you a name of a boat and the captain's name and the boat name and number, and it's just you just show up, you just get all your stuff together, you're going down to the port, call the captain, and first thing you do is just do a safety check of the boat. You got the flares, you got the life jackets, got this lifeboat isn't expired. All right, fax that off to the coordinator and you're gone. And so, and you think about working on those boats. So those people that do that work out there, they like to be their own boss. And so it's like government man comes on the boat, they're told they have to have a man on the boat. You spend the first 48 hours to try not to get thrown in the Gulf of Mexico, I mean,
Yeah.
But I would always just, say, look, man, I'm just trying to get the best data I can get so somebody else can make the best decision they can make.
Yeah.
And eventually, we would come around, know.
That's really neat.
So
500
meters
trawl,
man.
pulling up samples. So 1,500 feet plus deep in the ocean. Like it's just a whole different world.
I mean, one time brought up this sea robin of some kind. It was like, rainbow colored, but his dorsal fin was like pink with yellow polka dots. And you're like, what? Why?
Yeah.
Why do you look like this?
It's like something out of a Dr. Seuss book or something.
Yeah. It didn't even make any sense, And then, it's like other viper, I think they call it viper fish. And it was able to see one of those. It's just, they're not real big, but they have these like long dagger looking teeth coming up from the top. Really neat, just fascinating. Everything that you'd bring up. The shrimp and the crabs too, everything is just different. It's all, been down there for a long time.
Yeah.
And it just looks different than what everybody else sees,
Yeah. So I'm thinking from that to Lotus pads and 3 feet of water on Ross Barnett Reservoir. That's covering the spectrum right there.
Man, aquatic life is interesting though, what's going on beneath the surface is definitely interesting. And so I've always just wanted to get it figured out,
Yeah. Well, and Chip, as he tells that story, it's amazing how many people are here in different areas of wildlife management, fisheries, wildlife, that will tell a story about maybe they're younger as a kid and they see something, an animal, a blue crawfish, you hold it up and go, and all of a sudden that interest is piqued. And from that moment as a kid, the rest of your life, you have this almost, unquenchable curiosity about what's under the water or out there in the woods. It's really a similar story a lot.
And you want to protect it. You almost want to make sure that, your kids have the same opportunities you have to see that unique diversity, in the state. And so, that's a big reason why we do what we do, conserve these wildlife and fisheries, throughout the state for, future anglers and hunters.
In regards to the res, we mentioned a little bit about bass fishing. Crappie fishing at the res, huge deal, okay, and a great crappie fishery. But a lot of times I might be driving by on a trace and I say like they're sitting out in the middle of nowhere out in the res and they're catching crappie out there. So crappie fishing as it relates to the aquatic vegetation, how do those two intersect?
Well, I think the vegetation on the shoreline, it's a tremendous resource habitat for crappie spawns.
Okay.
So the fact that those plant communities are always there, and so when they spawn and those little fry hatch out, they've got something to eat and they've got cover, and so we got a good spawns and survival of each and every spawn there on Barnett. So it really helps.
So that's a part of the reason that the numbers are so good from a crappie standpoint, isn't it?
It's a stable habitat, and stable water levels. So, they bring the water up at the same time every year. It floods the aquatic plant community, and the aquatic plant community is like coming up as they go into spawn. And so they get in there and have refuge, somewhere to get those fry have somewhere to hide.
Yeah.
And so and then on top of that, it's a tremendous forage base. The shad population on Barnett is unbelievable, and it tends to. I feel like every time I go out there's more shad. But to be honest, that what sets it apart. A lot of people keep asking, or they would always ask me when I was there. Why don't we put regulations on the crappie on Barnett like we do on the flood control reservoirs? How much better it would be. And the truth of the matter is spawning and recruitment is so good on Barnett that you have to have that exploitation. You have to remove the numbers of fish that we do annually to get that fast growth. That would be negative. It would negatively impact that population to not allow for that harvest because it's just the same. I mean, it's a density dependence type of thing. I mean, when you have high numbers, there's not enough food to go around. And when you flip it, I mean, I think the growth rates on Barnett are probably as high as they've ever been, and I think I'm not positive, but I think a lot of it is due to the amount of harvest associated with the new, live scope and the ability to go get them throughout the entire year and find them out there. You talked about that guy out there in the middle of the lake. What's he doing out there in the middle? You got these river channels and ledges, and they can see with this new technology. They can see these fish out there on these old tree trunks,
Mm-hmm.
and they can find them. And they know what depth they are, and they can watch them hit the lure. I mean, it's insane how crazy it's gotten now. With the technology.
Yeah, it really is. All right, so the $1 million question. Save the best for last. Your number one bass fishing tip for Ross Barnett Reservoir. What would that be? I
mean, it's going to be staying in the vegetation. I mean, that's where I would want to fish. I like fishing plastics, so I'm not as big on jerk base and the crankbase and all that. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. I've always liked plastics, and so I can't stay away from that. I got to go with that. I mean, early morning buzz baits and the rivet frogs in the pads is would be my go-to. Now, obviously, when you get later on in the year, you need to maybe a little Carolina rig on some of those deeper ledges.
Okay. All right. Crappie fishing tip.
My favorite time crappie fishing is going to be in the spring when they're spawning, and I love putting in the little holes, the vegetation. That's my favorite part. You just find this little hole, and there's oftentimes there's one in there if it's the right time, and it's so much fun just to thunk, feeling that, is something else, So that's my favorite part of crappie fishing. Outside of that, typically I'm bass fishing.
Yeah. Do people wade crappie fish, those long jig poles at Barnett?
They do upriver.
Okay.
A lot of that is happening in the Delta. A lot of those oxbows, around those cypress knees. But you got some of that up the river. But when they get shallow like that, I mean, you can wade anywhere.
Yeah, just watch for gators.
I'd be scared.
That's how I was getting at that. Watch for alligators, Chip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure you will.
Those alligators, man, unless somebody's feeding them or something like that, they're not aggressive to people, man. They're scared of people. Where people get messed up is when they start feeding them, and then they get to associating people with food, and that's when it becomes a problem. But they're really they're not something I would be concerned about.
Yeah, right. Or were you talking about snakes?
I don't know. I've never really been afraid of snakes in the water.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't think I am either. I will say that I'm, after being a part of this podcast and talking to some people sitting in your chair about snakes, I'm more fascinated and interested in snakes than I think I've ever been. But I mean, that's part of it too, like spring and, or early summer, a place like that, it starts warming up.
Right.
You run into a water snake or a water moccasin every now and then, but that's just part of that whole ecosystem, isn't it?
It is.
Their food is out there also.
Yeah, I did a lot of wading, like during for that salvinia stuff. I mean, I ran into a bunch of moccasins back here. Just we were we were on foot. We were looking, had to find whatever we could find. And yeah, it was, little moccasins here, moccasins there. And then all of a sudden you're waist deep wading in a button bush slewing. You're like, oh, Lord, where's Mama at? He knows little baby gator out there and don't know where Mama's at, and makes a hair on the back of your neck stand up a little bit.
Yeah, but that's part of it too. Get your heart rate up just a little bit. Right. But really, again, even the things you're describing there, the purpose is for the fishery, therefore for the fish population, for the fishermen. I mean, that's really what the whole thing's for. Why else risk it? And it's your passion. It's why you do it, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to conserve and enhance fisheries, statewide. That's the goal of this agency. That's the goal of our bureau, and so whatever it takes, that's what we're willing to do. I mean, that's what we signed up for, is what we wanted to do. I wanted to be out there in that environment, be the one who's needing to get that done.
Yeah.
Because that's what my passion is. But of course, now I'm up here at headquarters and I'm managing grants. We're not going to talk about all that.
We'll save that for another show. Yeah, he's moved on to the office job. Yeah. That's great. And in the occasional ball tournament for one of those three boys.
That's right. That's nonstop ball.
That's it. That's great. Well, there's a little bit of an insight into the life of the Assistant Chief of Fisheries here at MDWFP with Ryan Jones. Ryan, great to meet you. Thanks for being here on the show, and we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Hope y'all enjoyed that. I know I did. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you outdoors.